Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. On behalf of Alaska Public Media, thank you for tuning in to Hangar Flying. This evening, we are honored to have Mr. Ron Sheardown on the show. Ron is an honoree in the 2014 Alaska Aviation Legends. This is a project that honors the men and women of Alaskan aviation and celebrates their contributions to aviation. Mr. Sheardown has had some amazing experiences as an aviator and as an explorer. Congratulations and welcome to the show, Ron.
Thank you.
You have over 19,000 hours and have flown all over the world. You've done quite a bit of flying, tracing historic routes and other Arctic adventures. Can you tell us a bit about your favorite flight?
Wow, all of them. Every flight is a pleasure. I think no matter how long or how short. And I've always said, anytime you fly and don't learn something, you better quit. I think that you have to keep learning. There's always something new out there. Just looking at the changes in navigation since I started flying 60-some years ago. You know, an NDB was a big thing to navigate with, and most of our Arctic navigation was celestial, and certainly our trips over the ice and to the North Pole and places like that, you carried a navigator and a sextant, and there was no other navigation. Today, you could practically sleep going to the North Pole with a GPS. Of course, I always take two in case one quits. But it's, you know, every day is a learning experience.
Now, you've been involved in some pretty high-profile rescues, including the rescue of a pilot that had been stranded for 58 days in the Arctic.
That's correct. Bob Gauthier went down the 2nd of February 1967, and we picked him up the 1st of April that year. And the search had been only lasted 2 weeks, and he was 2 miles outside the search area.
Wow.
And he did phenomenally well to survive. He lost about 60 pounds. I told him later that he was in better shape when we picked him up than when he went down because he was overweight. And Bob used to call me every year on April 1st, and we chatted away about what he was doing. He started Buffalo Airways, which is a very prominent program today called Ice Pilots, he just died last September, a year ago, and he lived another 45 years.
Thanks to you.
Yeah.
There's another rescue that people might not be familiar with, one that you did in 1964 when you went to look for a lost helicopter?
Yes. Well, that was an interesting one. I got a call. The RCMP in Canada would always call me if it was in the areas that I was working, like North Baffin Island or Greenland. They would always contact me on the HF radio and ask if I could assist. And they called that a helicopter had landed and run out of fuel, and he didn't know where he was. But he thought he was somewhere on the Melville Peninsula in the Canadian Arctic, and I was probably 200, maybe, yeah, about 200 miles away. And being as he could talk on his radio, his HF radio, when I was in the air, I asked him to hold his mic open for about 5 minutes, and I had a long wire antenna which I cranked out. And if you go out to second resonance on a long wire antenna, it becomes very directional. And I was able to scan back and forth on the horizon and pick up his peak. And I held that heading all the way and came straight to where he was. And he, of course, he called when he heard me, and directed me into where he was. But it was interesting, and I was just reading last week in Nome a story about the Keybird, which was the B-29 that went down in 200 miles north of Thule in 1946, and they got an HF-DF heading from I think it was Wainwright or Elmendorf, of a bearing of 046 from here in Alaska. And they actually flew that heading and found that airplane in North Greenland that way. And that was the only other time I've heard of someone using the HF as a direction finder.
Wow, we're so fortunate to have things like emergency locator transmitters and personal locator beacons nowadays. We're very fortunate.
You know, the whole...
well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that story with us. Folks, join us next time where we hear some more stories from Mr. Ron Sheardown, inductee in the 2014 Alaska Aviation Legends. Thank you.